failure to correct the problem has beaten me down. The repeated procedures over and over and over, and the repeated meningitis even after all the procedures, and the shunts in my spine, and the operations on my back and head and face and legs, and just the lack of success from these procedures has beaten me down. Not the fear of them, but I guess now it has turned to fear.
His name is David Stinson. In 1973, minor surgery turned to disaster, ended his career as an airline pilot, and sentenced him to a 7-year waking nightmare of pain, disability, and now just plain fear. In La Crosse, Wisconsin, he has joined a dozen other fugitives from mainline medicine. Here, they'll be encouraged to discover that the largest part of a cure lies not in any physician's hand, but rather in the vast reaches of their own minds. Good evening. Haven't we all heard of, say, a widow who dies within days of her husband, or perhaps of a sudden and unexplained recovery from some otherwise fatal illness? Historically, orthodox medicine has been hesitant to venture into such uncharted waters. But tonight, we'll report how that's changing. The payoff may be better, longer lives for us all as medical science begins looking not to pills and surgery, but to our own values and attitudes, our own minds, as the source of physical well-being. We call our program Mind Over Medicine. This is Norman Cousins, a man relishing some of the 521 million heartbeats he was told by doctors he would never have. On the day we met Mr. Cousins in Los Angeles, he was supposed to have been dead for more than 15 years. In 1964, when Norman Cousins was the editor of Saturday Review, he contracted something called ankylosing spondylitis. The connective tissue in his spine was literally disintegrating. As paralysis crept through his once vital body, he was hospitalized and then told there was virtually no chance of survival. But from his deathbed, he simply made a decision.
Well, I perhaps have an overdeveloped ability to block out things I don't like to hear. And I just decided that no matter what they said, I wasn't going to believe it. And I just said that, in effect, the hell with them. There are things that they may know, but they just don't know how this particular system works. At the point that I realized it was really my problem, that the doctors didn't have all the answers, and that I was responsible for that illness. My doctor didn't make me sick. I realized that I'd better get into the act.
At first, just for diversion from the hospital routine, Cousins began watching comedy films, the Marx Brothers, some reels from Candid Camera. Then Norman Cousins made a remarkable discovery. 10 minutes of genuine belly laughter would yield him 2 hours of pain-free sleep.
When one talks about the brain, one is talking about a very vital force in the maintenance of health and in the fight against disease. Confidence, the ability to hope, faith, the will to live, joy, laughter, all the positive emotions may have something to do with potentiating the human brain along those lines.
Buoyed by the success of his laughter therapy, Norman Cousins made another dramatic decision. He would check out of his hospital room and into a nearby hotel.
Sleep and rest are not easily come by when you're ill. Consequently, the last thing in the world you want to do when a patient is sleeping is to wake that patient up, whether for mealtime or for an alcohol rub or for taking pills or for any of the dozens of things that hospitals wake patients up for. You see, the patient is managed, and the hospital has its routine, and the patient has to fit into the routine.
Now situated in his hotel room, Cousins made another play in the struggle, terminating nearly all of his medication.
all these painkillers were toxic in varying degrees. And so I had to decide what was more important. It seemed to me that I could stand the pain so long as I knew I was recovering.
And of course, he did recover. Today, Norman Cousins teaches courses in medical humanities at UCLA. But he is also spearheading a special UCLA committee of medical scientists who are right now helping to pose the questions researchers will try to answer in years to come. One of those questions is how the Norman Cousinses survive serious illness, while others do not.
The brain is the last great frontier, I think, in this world. And we're just at the beginning, relatively, in terms of knowledge about the way the human brain works and what it can do. The most important area of that knowledge, of course, is the role of the human brain in maintaining health and in overcoming disease. And making the most of it means mobilizing the resources of the patient.
If mobilizing the resources of the patient is important when he is at death's door, why not when he's perfectly healthy? Although it may look a little like a convention of medical equipment salesmen, this is really an innovative training class for the employees of Minnesota Blue Cross Blue Shield. These are people largely without medical backgrounds, learning how to use the tools of the doctor in caring for their own families.
And of course, you ask them to say, ah, ah. Okay, now that's, of course, really playing doctor.
The mastermind of all this peering and poking is Dr. Keith Sainert, a professor in the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. Under his supervision, laymen are issued black doctor bags. They will learn, among other skills, how to take blood pressure, examine ears, nose, and throat, and then refer to a booklet which tells what different observations might mean. If symptoms are potentially serious, the directions are to call the doctor. But part of the motivation for all this comes from the estimate that 85% of all doctor visits are unnecessary. The people in this class belong to the same health maintenance organization, so fewer doctor visits can mean lower health care costs for everyone.
Okay, yes.
But perhaps even more significant is that somehow the germ of one of Norman Cousins' ideas has found its way into this room. What we're seeing here is symbolic of a coming age in caring for our health, and it's a considerable departure from the popular notion of years gone by. As a nation, we've been conditioned to thinking of the physician as an all-knowing, all-powerful, almost godlike manipulator of our health and well-being. He had the secrets, he had the tools. But according to growing numbers in the medical community, people like Dr. Sainert, all of that is in for some change.
There is a shift in the what I call the health partnership. It used to be that the physician was the captain of the ship. We're believing now that the patient, the individual, is the captain of the ship. And we believe that in that equation, the lifestyle is a far more important factor than the doctors and the hospitals and the pills.
Just a moment ago, a doctor told us that lifestyle is more important than hospitals, doctors, or pills. Heresy? Well, if such talk ever was heresy, it isn't anymore. Last year, the Surgeon General issued a report entitled Healthy People. It surveyed the 10 leading causes of death for a typical year in this country and concluded that only about 10% of those deaths had to do with inadequate health care. Another 40% were caused by a combination of either genetic or environmental factors. But, according to the Surgeon General, as many as half of the deaths in the United States today are due to unhealthy behavior or lifestyle. The Surgeon General issues an emphatic call for us to reorder our priorities in the struggle against illness. One place that call was heard recently is here on the campus of the University of Minnesota. Organized by a U of M Medical School Student Association, it was billed as a conference on lifestyles and distress management. For 2 days, the auditorium was jammed. mostly with medical students and others soon-to-be health professionals. Lunch was a model of the kind of nutrition which was extolled from the podium in the lecture hall. And there were workshops on everything from hypnosis to therapeutic dance to foot massage. Throughout the conference, the emphasis was on something called wellness, a state of being that is the opposite of illness and better than just normal. Wellness, however, requires a holistic approach, an approach which takes into account the whole person, his attitudes and lifestyle, including his diet. Dr. C. Norman Sheely is a respected neurosurgeon and also president of the newly formed American Holistic Medical Association.
Good nutrition is absolutely essential. Poor nutrition in itself creates feelings of stress and produces physiologic stress. But good nutrition alone is not adequate. You need good exercise. Physical exercise is one of the most potent stress reducers we have. It's more powerful than antidepressants for treating people with depression.
In case you haven't guessed, holistic medicine emphasizes prevention. And holistic doctors waste little time in jumping on the Surgeon General's bandwagon, questioning why so much money and effort is committed to managing people who are already sick, instead of just trying to keep them well in the first place. Dr. Kenneth Pelletier is an assistant clinical professor at the University of California School of Medicine in San Francisco.
That we have not had a healthcare system to this point in time. We've had a pathology management industry. Okay? Its budget last year was $200 billion. It's increasing, and if you take the part of that second largest and fastest growing industry and you overlap it with the petrochemical industry, the pharmaceutical portion of the petrochemical industry, you find that it's the largest and fastest growing industry that we have.
If you've visited any American hospital recently, you've seen some staggeringly complex and costly technology. Nationwide, this approach to health care runs into the hundreds of billions, and much of it is heavily subsidized by the federal government. Yet, according to the Surgeon General, only 4 cents out of each federal health care dollar goes for disease prevention.
That is trying to find the horse after the horse has escaped from the barn. That's not even closing the door. And the high technology, of course, is excellent at making a diagnosis, but that only tells you what's wrong. And what has been killed, if you will, or damaged by a poor lifestyle.
According to advocates of holistic medicine, the appeal of all this machinery, all the lights, all the wires, has to do with our national mindset. They say we tend to look at the human body the same way we do the family car. We drive it until it starts to act up, and then we look for a mechanic. We expect him to do the tuning and maintenance. If the problem is more serious, perhaps we can just have him install a whole new part. If that doesn't work, we simply conclude we got stuck with a lemon and presume there was nothing we could have done about it anyway. Was there?
The diseases that kill people, maim people, and make people ill are diseases of lifestyle. The causes of illness in our society listed in their order of importance are cigarette smoking, cigarette smoking, cigarette smoking, cigarette smoking, alcohol, obesity, improper diet, and lack of physical exercise. It is not the fault of medicine, it's the fault of our lifestyle. We have become a hedonistic society. And of course, medicine and politics and everything else reflect what people want, but we can't cure someone of smoking, which is poisoning their entire body. We can't cure someone of eating gobs of junk food. We can't cure people who don't exercise. Those are things people have to do for themselves.
What happens is every time you lift it up...
What the holistic physician is saying is not that the pills, the machines, and the surgery are an evil, but rather that they are not enough, and that there may be less costly, more efficient ways to achieve health.
Nothing about holistic medicine is antagonistic to what's gone before, but it's a balance with an emphasis on health promotion and health maintenance rather than the treatment of illness after it's already in onset.
But how many of us have tried upgrading our lifestyles and found there just isn't much motivation to keep up with the regular physical exercise, the running, the jogging, not to mention giving up smoking and banana cream pie at the same time? Well, taking just such frailties of the human will into consideration, an experiment. The people boarding this bus are heading for an environment where they would actually have to go out of their way not to live a healthy lifestyle. 140 miles north of the Twin Cities, they arrive at a rather posh resort called Minneswing Acres. For 4 days and 3 nights, they will learn about prolonging and enjoying life through proper diet, physical exercise, and good mental health. It's all sponsored by St. Louis Park Medical Center, Methodist Hospital, and the Med Center Health Plan. They call it simply SHAPE. And this is roughly how it goes. Waking to classical music virtually at the crack of dawn, participants and leaders alike sip fruit juice and then head for the tennis courts. In this case, however, not to play tennis. Participants are guided through warm-up exercises and then given the choice of a variety of slightly more strenuous activities. If you care to run, you can run, but there is emphasis on alternatives as well.
Sure, you can really put out if you want to exercise and work really hard and sweat and really put yourself into the pain, torture, and agony. But our whole philosophy is to try and get people to realize that they can go out, exercise, enjoy it, and still get the cardiorespiratory benefits, and they can still be burning up the calories.
All right, you really did a nice job. Your workout starts the day just right. I think we're ready for some breakfast, right? Give yourself a hand. Looks super.
For some, reading the menus here can be a little traumatic.
Well,
But invariably, the likes of, say, pancakes with yogurt and fresh fruit ends up much more appealing on the plate than it is in print. In between meals and exercise, the group usually retires to the resort's lecture room. It's here that they'll learn some rather interesting facts about lifestyle. They'll hear, for example, that 50% of diabetes could be prevented by good diet, and that being 20% overweight in itself reduces life expectancy 5 years.
Dr. Valen.
But even more startling are scientific data relating to the mind's influence in illness. Dr. Jim Reinertson is an internist specializing in rheumatology at St. Louis Park Medical Center.
When Dr. Valen broke down the relative contribution of the adult adjustment score and other known risk factors for illness, like smoking, obesity, and alcohol use, he found that none of them individually was any stronger a predictor of subsequent disease than was a rating of your mental health. In fact, the rating of your mental health was about 2-fold stronger than any of the other individual risk factors for disease.
2 steps, right side, ready. 2 steps.
It may surprise you to learn that most of the participants in SHAPE are themselves health professionals. A good number are doctors. Others are executives or corporate leaders. This is really a pilot program. It's intended that participants will offer suggestions or criticisms. But at the same time, part of the idea is to begin affecting grassroots change in lifestyle by influencing those who influence others. And as a consciousness-raising, the SHAPE weekend does seem to have an impact.
I guess you have to sit back and say, hey, is the risk I'm taking, is it fair to myself? Is it fair to my family? Or am I willing to pay those penalties in order to enjoy something that is maybe enjoyment for the moment, but for the long range is not good for me?
Advocates of lifestyle improvement exist along a broad spectrum. SHAPE is comparatively conservative, tying its rather cautious approach to established Western science.
Wonderful miracle that is your body.
Others are more intuitive and experimental. But the underlying message of holistic health seems to be well taken by just about everyone who understands it. It's saying simply that much of health is a byproduct of a good life. And part of that is just enjoying ourselves, taking time, if you will, to smell the roses.
Get into a comfortable position, if you would. And notice that almost everyone in the room was uncomfortable. We go through life, you know, like this. Uncross your arms and legs. Close your eyes, because you want to block out sensation from outside. Feel your face. Is it relaxed? If not, let go. Choose to let go. You can take the relaxation deeper by concentrating upon a pleasant image. Imagine yourself in your favorite spot of nature, alone. Feel yourself alone.
Dr. Norman Shealy, we found, practices what he preaches. His favorite spot of nature is Brindabella Farms, 565 acres of steep green pasture outside La Crosse, Wisconsin. Dr. Shealy's hobby is breeding show horses, but his vocation revolves around this building, the Pain and Health Rehabilitation Center, a one-of-a-kind holistic clinic for sufferers of chronic pain. About a dozen times each year, this scene is repeated. As though to a Midwestern Lourdes, patients flock from all over the United States, some with canes, others with walkers, nearly all of them having long ago been told by traditional medicine that there is nothing to be done for them. A session here lasts 2 weeks. The patients stay at a nearby motel, but spend each day at the clinic.
From now until 5:30 each day, you will be busy. We hope you will be so busy that you will not have time to think about yourself.
Whining and complaining are against the rules here, perhaps ironically, considering how much these people really have to whine and complain about.
Pleased to meet you, Dr. TCMediaNow.
David Stinson was a helicopter gunship pilot, 3 times shot down in Vietnam. Returning to the States, he completed training as a commercial airline pilot in 1973. Then, at the urging of the airline, he had routine surgery for a minor sinus defect. The surgery left him with a hole in his brain cavity, a spinal fluid leak, and excruciating pain. Since then, he has had 8 operations, 4 of them opening his skull, attempting to correct the problem. All have failed. Today, he is left with a small tube in his spine to relieve fluid pressure, and a lot of bitterness toward the surgeon who changed his life.
It took me 10 years to get where I was, and study and sacrifice and training and what have you. And he took it away from me in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'll never be able to do it again.
What's happened with your marriage, with all this?
The last year has been the toughest, or since June, since I had the 3 bouts of meningitis this past year, because I have been a virtual bitch to live with. And I vented my frustrations on her until her cup runneth over, and we met head on and had a knockdown, drag-out argument, and I finally realized that I was indeed at fault, and humbly begged her forgiveness and what have you, and
I would have to say that, considering the potential seriousness of this kind of problem, I think you ought to have further surgery. If willing to do it, I would have it done.
I found it difficult to reach inside myself to find the strength to go through it. My bottle of Brave pills is empty. I don't have any left.
Although David Stinson came here from Connecticut hoping for relief from his pain, he must now settle for just the courage to face another operation. Dr. Shealy and he agree that this alone would be worth the 2 weeks at the clinic.
Okay, why don't you just take off your shirt?
Trying now just to temporarily reduce David's discomfort so he can better relax, Dr. Sheely begins acupuncture.
I've had...
Well, maybe I'll be able to add to my reserve of brave pills and have a little more intestinal fortitude to face another operation. Right now, I don't think I could. I could handle it mentally. Oh, yes, I feel so good. That one smarts. You would think that after having had so many operations and procedures that it would be no big deal to go through another one. But it is a big deal. I've passed out from having so much pain in my head that I couldn't tolerate it. Again, trying to be a hero and not asking for a pain shot and just trying to find for myself how much could I really take, how much could I withstand, and I withstood it to the point of it rendering me unconscious. I love to play golf. I'm unable to do it. I have been unable to have any sexual life. I've been unable to do simple tasks. So the simplest things that you do every day and take for granted are things that I strive to be able to do and am unable to do because of the increase in the pain level.
I'm going to leave you alone for about 25 minutes and just let those work.
All righty.
Okay?
I'll be here.
We'll save you lunch.
Sadie Miller came here from Iowa with her husband, Floyd. 3 years ago, Sadie had surgery to remove an infected node near her lung. Despite severe pain ever since, she says she's gotten little help from her doctor.
I was still hurting, and he said, you can expect to hurt. You had bursitis, you had surgery, you can expect to hurt.
I used to be kind of a happy-go-lucky person, and now she's nervous, edgy.
It's been miserable. I don't want to go anyplace. I don't want to see people.
It's affected everybody's lives that has contact with her. She's not the same person. It's changed her personality.
I just soon not be bothered with, you know, having people around.
As he did with David Stinson, Dr. Sheely starts Sadie off with acupuncture.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hurt good?
Mm-hmm.
At first, it would appear the acupuncture merely adds to Sadie's discomfort. But soon, the desired effects begin.
Does it feel better, worse, or the same as when I started?
Better.
Okay. Do you still have some pain?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I feel better now.
Okay.
Dr. Sheely is using acupuncture in combination with electrical nerve stimulation. The idea is to send a message through Sadie's nervous system to her brain, blocking the pain sensation and at the same time exciting the production of endorphin, the body's own morphine-like painkiller.
I think that the surgery itself was not faulty. The damage that's been done is very, very minor. There's no serious harm done. It's all past, too. It's not something new, and yet it keeps screaming, Sadie, I hurt, I hurt, I hurt. And these nerves need to be retrained. And they can be. That hurt?
After about 20 minutes, the needles come out, and Sadie's own brain has worked its magic.
How you feel?
Pretty good.
Does it hurt at all?
No.
Then that must be better than pretty good.
Well...
Wouldn't you think she would reach up and hug me and kiss me and... No.
Shall we dance?
Hey, that's a great idea. Now all we have to do is find out how long it lasts.
The typical patient at Dr. Sheely's clinic has been in pain for 6 years and has run up several $1,000s in medical expenses each of those years. Drugs have become a way of life. But Dr. Sheely feels pain-killing and mood-altering substances actually interfere with recovery, and patients are persuaded to give them up. It is also typical for the patients here to have had several surgeries. Even though Norman Sheely was himself a neurosurgeon, he has now abandoned that part of his practice.
I had the feeling in 1970 that we needed to find a way of handling people with chronic pain. That the surgical and drug approach was not only not good, it was actually bad for these patients. Now, I don't mean that surgery is not appropriate for aneurysms and truly ruptured discs and trauma of various kinds, surgery is necessary in those situations. But for benign and chronic disease, most of the time, surgery is inappropriate.
To Dr. Shealy, what is appropriate is using the body's own healing mechanisms wherever possible. And like almost all patients, David Stinson and Sadie Miller are exposed to a wide range of treatments. Special music is played through headsets, music designed as a backdrop for reverie and relaxation. Temperature biofeedback helps train patients to control body functions as they relax. The more they relax, the more their blood veins dilate, and the higher their skin surface temperature rises. Transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation uses a small battery-operated power source to send messages, altering the brain's interpretation of pain. Flickering lights can influence brain waves. The lights flash at the frequency which corresponds to relaxation. The brain tends to synchronize its waves to the lights. Dr. Shealy calculates that nearly 3/4 of his patients improve by 50 to 100%, and that improvement lasts at least 2 years. He also claims the average patient's medical costs decrease by about 85%. We found no challenges to Dr. Shealy's calculations or claims.
Yeah, right.
Now, this is really,
It's not bad at all.
no, not really. It's fine. No, it's going to be great.
Amos, you got a glass there?
I don't have one down here. I'd like to have one. Everything's moving so fast. The society's moving so fast. Your life is moving so fast. But you get here, you just have a chance to do nothing. And it's conducive to it, and it's respected at this time that you do nothing while you're in the hot tub.
Life, as it's come to be defined in the 20th century, can be a complicated affair. Lots of noise, lots of schedules, lots of decisions, lots of uncertainty. Perhaps the one thing of which we can be certain is change, and that with each new pressure, with each alteration of the social landscape, there comes an added challenge for the human mind and body to adapt. It's that challenge which we have come to call simply stress. Haven't we all had the temptation at some time or another to try to escape stress? To change jobs, pack up, move to a smaller, quieter town. If stress is the result of a crowded environment and a hectic schedule, maybe we could just leave all that behind. Let's think about that. Let's imagine a small, peaceful town as the friendly people who live here pass a few moments in another tranquil day. Over at the park, a nice elderly lady is just sitting down at her favorite bench, and she eyes a cute little dog making its way across the grass. Down the street, we'll say, a young man is just killing some time before the Saturday matinee, and with a certain measure of appreciation, he notices a young woman working on the window display at Corson's store. Meanwhile, Officer Chuck Jones is just making his routine rounds. Morning, Chuck. Hardly think of this as a stressful situation. In fact, looks pretty peaceful. But really, there's no way of knowing. Does that dog remind the lady of the one that used to follow her home from school when she was a girl? Or does she have a phobia of dogs, which is right now causing her a dreadful fright? Or take our young man. Is he thinking ahead to the movie this afternoon and getting ready to ask this young woman to join him? Or is he so shy that the very thought makes his stomach churn with the fear of rejection? As for the policeman, he may be trained to regard certain types of people with suspicion. Does he wonder about that young man loitering near the store? Fact is, according to those we've contacted, while stress may come as a byproduct of our surroundings, it's really not in our environment. It's in ourselves. Stress is the product of our perception of a given moment. It can be brought on by negative experiences or by seemingly positive ones. There is stress in chaos and in boredom. Stress is also necessary. Our body's response to a perceived threat is linked to the very survival of our species. This so-called fight or flight response produces very real changes in body chemistry. All of us have felt that surge of adrenaline, the resounding echo of prehistoric genetic codes. But what happens with stress in a social environment in which there is no appropriate opportunity for an outward physical reaction?
Long-term, unrelenting stress, job pressures, financial ambiguities, these kinds of stressors affect the body as though we were faced with a biological threat. In other words, we perceive the loss of a job to be a threat to our life. As a result of that, over time, blood pressure elevates, muscle tension increases, heart rate increases, the electrical activity of the brain changes. All of these will tend toward later symptoms if they remain unchecked.
All of you are here because of stress. You're here because of some problem that is stressful to you.
Norman Shealy defines stress as not only emotional, but physical and chemical as well. And evidence indeed suggests that keeping trim is not the only benefit of exercise, but perhaps also the efficient use of the substances our bodies produce under stress. Likewise, the reasons for good nutrition and not smoking also relate to maintaining a healthy balance in body chemistry. The human body is, after all, vastly interwoven. Our immunity to disease depending on subtle chemical interactions. But for each of us along the biological chain, there are weak links, minor defects, some perhaps inherited. The difference between health or illness is very often a question of how much stress, chemical, physical, and emotional, we can withstand before we simply break down at the weakest link. But according to the growing mountain of evidence, it is our brain which holds the trump cards. Psychosomatic means literally mind-body. And numerous studies have begun to support the notion that emotional stress on its own may have enough impact on the mind-body equation to make the critical difference between health and illness.
When you look at the diseases that are considered to be psychosomatic or stress-related, these have been called the afflictions of civilization, the modern plagues. These include cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and arthritis. That is excluding the very pervasive incidence of depression which accompanies all of these. If you look at those four major disease categories, these comprise the major causes of illness, morbidity, and mortality in the United States, Europe, and Japan. So we're talking about the predominance of disease being stress-related, being psychosomatic in nature, and ultimately that means they're preventable.
At the Stanford Research Institute near San Francisco, progress is being made in a study typical of those which show a link between stress and illness. In this reenactment, a researcher administers a standardized interview, observing not only what the subject says, but the way he says it.
Close friends, how would they describe you in those sets of terms? As hard driving and ambitious, or more relaxed and easygoing?
I think I'm reasonably ambitious.
Depending on the subject's style of response, his behavior will be categorized, either type A or type B. Those with type A behavior pattern are suspected of having a twofold greater risk of coronary heart disease than the type Bs. Dr. Ray Rosenman is senior research physician for the study and also co-author of a book entitled Type A Behavior and Your Heart.
Type A likes to control those around him at work. Type A likes to control their spouse and children, likes to always be aware of everything that's going on in order to control. There's a need to control. How are they going to do this? Well, they're going to do it in a couple of ways, aren't they? They're going to have to hurry, develop a chronic sense of time urgency, increased level of impatience. They're going to accelerate the rate at which they perform all activity, whether they are walking, talking, driving, eating, anything, and do it even when they don't have to.
According to Dr. Rosenman, we are divided about 50-50 between type A individuals and the more relaxed, easygoing type B. It is thought that type A behavior works in combination with other risks for heart disease, heightening the danger from, say, smoking, high blood pressure, or sedentary lifestyle. But a number of researchers have suggested that the behavior pattern alone may be a better predictor of coronary disease than any other single factor.
It's very rare that one will find anybody incurring clinical coronary disease under the age of 60 who is not type A. Very rarely do type Bs get coronary disease, and then only when they're enormously high on the other factors, a very high cholesterol level and so forth.
Researchers think that type A behavior may be the result of a heightened perception of stress. Type A's appear to feel more stress in a given environment than type B's, and seem to have a stronger physical reaction to it. Part of that reaction is the secretion of adrenaline at nerve endings surrounding the coronary artery. Through a complex process, the arteries eventually become damaged. But the exact processes need to be better understood.
For me, type A behavior pattern...
Dr. Margaret Chesney is principal investigator for the type A behavior study.
And we have a behavior pattern that we know somehow goes in one end of a mystery and comes out as heart disease at the other end. And we're trying to study that area in between. And perhaps if we can learn enough about that area, we will be that much further along to look at other diseases where we suspect that behavior may play a role.
It is suspected that type A behavior is learned, and already some encouraging evidence suggests that it can be unlearned as well. After all, if our minds can function as slayer, why not as healer too?
With all the...
At the Pain and Health Rehabilitation Center, patients are guided through mental imaging exercises in which the mind is brought to bear directly on their pain.
I see myself receiving from the most famous healers in all history that which is necessary for optimal health.
This process uses elements of hypnosis and attempts to deal with physical symptoms by directly influencing the nervous system.
The autonomic nervous system responds to image or imagination. So when you image lemon, for instance, your autonomic nervous system produces salivation. When you image comfort, your autonomic nervous system, if you are not taking drugs which inhibit it, allows you to produce the increased endorphins that you need to be comfortable.
Some physicians have grown so confident in the effectiveness of imaging and hypnosis, they're using these techniques the way some doctors use a prescription pad. Dr. Dan Cohen is a pediatrician and director of the emergency room at Minneapolis Children's Hospital. He's been seeing this young man for asthma and bedwetting, and using hypnosis for both.
That you can give your body all the signals you need to be comfortable about your asthma. I have no doubt that when we're doing imagery and when kids are in altered states of consciousness this way, that there are biochemical changes taking place, and that has something to do with why their asthma or their bedwetting or whatever we're talking about is improving. All of my patients are taking medication, and that these tools that we're using are adjuncts in clinical care. But the fact is that some of them, and I'm not able to predict in advance who, end up not needing medication. I'm not advocating that, but it may be what we're looking at down the line in the future.
Okay, very pleasant, very enjoyable.
The use of hypnosis in medicine is not new. Here we see it used in place of chemical anesthesia for abdominal surgery. This took place recently at Fridley's Unity Hospital, but such feats of mental control have been documented for more than a century. The hypnotist here is Dr. Alexander Levitin, an oncologist who uses hypnosis in his everyday practice. It was here in Dr. Levitin's office that we witnessed a startlingly graphic example of the mind's control over the body. Using our sound man, Dave Bissonette, as a subject, Dr. Levitin agreed to a demonstration. With a standard hypnotic induction, Dave was first guided to deaden sensation in his hand.
I want that left hand to be heavy, wooden, numb.
Then, a sterile needle was passed through his skin. Dave reported later that he felt the needle, but almost no pain.
No. You felt me touching you, but it really wasn't uncomfortable, was it? It's fine.
Now, the hard part. The needle passed through Dave's skin in 2 places, but he was instructed to permit bleeding from only one of the punctures when the needle was removed.
Okay, here we are. Now, you can take a look at what you've done. This is one side and not the other. Ah.
That's the one I didn't want.
Only after Dave's excitement with his success, which momentarily interrupts his concentration, does blood begin to flow from the other puncture.
The mind has far greater control over the body than most of us perceive, and really to give credence to, if you will, that there are many aspects of our health, well-being, that are under the control, maybe not of our conscious mind, but certainly the unconscious mind.
If the mind can have such control over the body in dealing with bleeding, or pain, or asthma, how about in helping to cope with that medical Vietnam we've come to know as the war on cancer? Well, in Fort Worth, Texas, we did find imaging techniques being used for cancer. This is Dr. O. Carl Simonton. In the late 60s, he was testing motivation techniques designed to help cancer patients improve lifestyles. Quite by accident, he says, he found the techniques affecting the cancer itself.
I was dumbfounded with what I had seen as far as the possibility in a person changing his or her attitude from one of hopelessness to one of hope. Was incredible what I saw as the possibilities. Then when I applied it, I began to see things that I couldn't explain medically happening.
Today, from offices in this building, Dr. Simonton directs the Cancer Counseling and Research Center. In footage provided by the center, a group of patients is instructed to imagine their cancers being overcome by the body's immune system.
The erroneous image is the social image that cancer is this big, powerful disease. It's not. It's a disease of weak and confused cells. So I'm asking the person to picture the disease as we really understand it to be, a weak and confused disease, and seeing their body doing what we want it to. Their white blood cells coming in and attacking and devouring the cancer. Now we know that that's not happening sufficiently in the classical person who's dying of cancer. What we're wanting them to do is to picture their body responding in the way we want it to.
Dr. Simonton is the first to emphasize that his method is unproven, and patients here continue all their regular cancer treatments. But according to Dr. Simonton's figures, patients who follow his method survive, on average, twice as long as they would otherwise be expected to.
I believe that we have looked at enough people in enough ways and compiled enough numbers to say there's something here. There are some trends that we're seeing. To make strong statements like, we've proven this, we've shown this, no, that's inappropriate.
Dr. Simonton says he's observed common life patterns in his patients. Those who get cancer typically feel unloved but bottle it up. Later in life, he says, they suffer a loss, and shortly thereafter, cancer sets in.
When I have the loss, my children leaving home, or I lose the job, then I'm thrown back into the feelings of being unlovable, unloved, unworthy, unable to get what I want out of life. And I fall into this sense of great despair, helplessness, hopelessness. I bottle it all up because I'm not telling anyone, again, this is the way I've lived my life. So it's all turned inside. To me, that's a typical setup for the person then to come up with a clinical malignancy.
Dr. Simonton is known for following up with his patients, and the day we met him, he paid a house call. Katie Hyatt had cancer twice in 19 years. The first time immediately after the death of her brother, the second shortly following her daughter's particularly traumatic divorce. While Katie never attended a session at the counseling center, during her second illness, she did follow the imaging exercises with a tape recorder. She also had radiation therapy, but she is convinced she is free of cancer today primarily because of her mental attitude.
I had cancer cells all up and down my spine, and in my rib cage and in my pelvic bone, and I couldn't get out of bed without help, and I couldn't walk without help, and I was on my way out. Everybody else thought I didn't. I wanted to take care of my husband. I wanted to take care of my children. I wanted to see my grandchildren. I had a reason for living, and I wasn't about to give it up. I'm not saying I believe in faith healing, and I'm not being a religious fanatic. That's not it at all. It's something that everybody can do. And it has helped me feel better. It has made me get well. And it doesn't cost you one penny.
At the Pain and Health Rehabilitation Center, it was the end of the 2-week session, and we returned to La Crosse for a final visit. A few patients said they still had some of their pain, although everyone seemed to have undergone a positive transformation, in spirit, if nothing else. But Sadie Miller was representative of many here. She told us her pain had all but vanished.
I just made up my mind that I'm not going to hurt. And I'm going to let this thing work for me, and I'm going to do the things that I need to do because I don't want to hurt. I never dreamed that it could be this good in such a short time.
Both Sadie and Floyd told us they would make some changes, get more exercise, watch their nutrition, and make a special effort to avoid emotional stress. But more than anything, they talked about how their lives had been put back together.
It's not just getting rid of the pain. I think that this place here could help many people just live a better life together, even if they didn't have anything wrong with them, to just go through this.
If you know there's got to be some force that's working with you and for you, and it's good. It really is.
Almost like a character from The Wizard of Oz, David Stinson was here to regain his courage, the courage to face another operation. And although his physical pain is still with him, it appears that his stay here was not in vain.
I'm convincing myself and my brain and programming myself that this is going to work. This one will work, and that is it, man. It's going to be all over.
It's perhaps ironic that for the patients we met, this was the last resort. Ironic that the end of the road could be the source of such new beginnings.
I've got to look forward to something to do in my life since I can't fly anymore. I want to be a contender again. Well, I was somebody at one time, and I kind of felt like I was nobody. I've been nobody for a lot of years, and I want to be somebody again.
It may have crossed your mind tonight that lots of what we've seen really isn't new. When you were growing up, your mother probably told you to get enough rest, to stop worrying, to eat right, don't forget to take a sweater. Intuitively, she always knew that was important. Now, science is finding out just how important. But still, we seem to want to resist doing what we know is good for us. Maybe it's our chance to get back at Mom for all the time she told us to eat our spinach. It's that resistance, more than anything, which stands as the test of whether holistic medicine will do us any good. After all, the New Age healer is asking us to take charge of our own health. And perhaps it will say something about our collective will to survive when it's known whether we accept the challenge. I'm Dave Moore.